All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything Cultural Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be discussing the rematch in the Pac-12 championship game between Oregon and Washington. Likely not just for the Heisman Trophy, but also, more importantly, a playoff spot as well. Ducks, 8-point favorites. 68.5 is the total. 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC, live from Las Vegas in Allegiant Stadium. Look at the Oregon offense. Bo Nix, he's just a man on a mission, Nick. I've been saying that the last couple of weeks, and he just continues to prove it, having a phenomenal month where he's just playing the best football of anyone in the country, limiting his turnovers, only 2 interceptions, 3,900 yards passing, 37 touchdowns through the air, another 6 on the ground, with nearly a 79% completion rating. And I think Brock Heward said it would be at 85% if you take out drops. So that's pretty admirable. And Nix is just playing with so much confidence. His accuracy has been top-notch. They're not just drawing things up that are easy completions, Nick. It is like this every single game. He hasn't had a game this year below 72% of completion in his passes. He's throwing with a lot of touch, nice accuracy. The confidence is just unreal right now. What do you make of Bo Nix as he heads into Vegas looking for one more victory to punch his ticket to the playoff?
Bo Nix was the prodigal son down in the plains at Auburn when he committed. The son of Patrick Nix, Auburn legend. He was the man on the plains when he committed, and it's funny enough, he beat Oregon in his first career game in Dallas, Texas, in a kickoff game against Oregon. And now, several years later, he's leading Oregon potentially to the playoffs and a Heisman win for himself. I mean, just a phenomenal season from Nix. He's really revitalized his career out there in Eugene. The biggest issue with Bo Nix was that the interceptions were a problem, right? His freshman year in 2019, he had 6 picks, 16 touchdowns. 2020 was the bad year, 12 touchdowns to 7 picks. He cut down on that in the limited games played in 2021. He played 10 games with 3 picks, but then again, jumped back up to 7 last year. Some costly interceptions, but this year, only 2 picks, 37 touchdowns, nearly 4,000 yards passing, nearly 80% completion percentage. I mean, he is just absolutely lighting up the stat sheet every single week. He's having an incredible season at Oregon. This is the Bo Nix that you thought you were going to get out of high school. He was Alabama Mr. Football in 2018, SEC Freshman of the Year in 2019 for a reason. This is the guy that you expected to be the quarterback, the next star in college football, and he's done this at Oregon. He's revitalized his career and is looking phenomenal. It's one of the most impressive runs from a quarterback I've seen in terms of a pure pocket passer. He is great running the ball as well. He has some ability to do that with the 6 touchdowns on the ground. Just a phenomenal season from Bo Nix. He is just a man on a mission, like you said, totally locked in, and he's chasing that national championship, and he has put himself with the Ducks in a fantastic position here heading to Vegas with a rematch against Washington.
Yeah, they certainly haven't been using his legs as much, trying to keep him healthy, but they still like to get him involved on, a QB sneak, a read option, or in the red zone. And you look at his weapons, you have 2 guys with over 70 receptions. Troy Franklin, 1,349 yards, 14 touchdowns out wide. He's just a phenomenal route runner. He seems to always be open. These guys have great chemistry, along with his brother, adopted brother, Tez Johnson, came over from Troy, 942 yards on 9 touchdowns. A little bit less of an average at 13.5 yards per catch, but he's a slot weapon. He's an underneath guy they look to when they need to convert. Gary Bryant, third leading receiver, left that game in the second half against Oregon State. All he's saying right now is he's okay, so I anticipate he'll be a game-time decision. Bucky Irving, the running back, 48 receptions of his own. Terrence Ferguson, 36 for 379. He's been very good. Trayshawn Holden, another guy. 5 of them that have over 30-plus receptions. They really dish it out. And even Patrick Herbert has a couple of touchdowns this year. I think one of them actually came in that first matchup with Washington. So they use every bit of this receiving core, Nick. And this is going to be a lot of weapons for Washington to try and cover up, especially with the emergence of Johnson, who didn't start the season all that great, but the chemistry between him, Nix, and Franklin is an all-time high right now heading into Vegas.
A fantastic offense that has so many weapons. Troy Franklin, 1,350 yards, 17.5 yards per catch, which when you have 77 receptions, you have 17.5 yards per grab. That's an incredible number. Really thinking about that 14 touchdowns, Tez Johnson. He looked good in the game against Oregon State on Black Friday. He had a couple of great catches in that game, 942 yards, 13.5 and 9 scores. Gary Bryant Jr. has been solid as well, 14.6 yards per catch, 3 scores. Trayshawn Holden really hasn't broken out yet. Bucky Irving's been involved as a pass catcher as well. Terrence Ferguson's been involved as a pass catcher. Very talented group overall. This is just a dynamite offense that can hit you in so many different ways. There's a reason why they're scoring 45.3 points per game and having 5.84 yards per attempt on the ground, 4,000 yards passing. I mean, this offense is just incredible. They continue to get the job done every single week. It's just a fantastic unit top to bottom.
Yeah, and the rushing attack Certainly he's cooled off a bit. 5 games in a row of being held to under 155 yards rushing. Still finding the end zone though, and they're still averaging over 4 yards per carry in all of those games. Before that, they had 5 straight of 200 plus rushing. And that includes a game against Washington where they put up 204 and 5 yards per carry there in Seattle. Bucky Irving though, 1,043 yards, great contact balance, a physical specimen. And again, we talked about how many receptions he has as well. 10 touchdowns on the ground. Jordan James, 661 and 10 touchdowns, over 7 yards per carry, has been a very nice number 2. A total of 20 rushing touchdowns between these two guys. It's been terrific. The 1-2 punch they have. Again, Nix doesn't really run the ball as much, but it's just defying if you're an opposing defense to try and go against these guys, because not only is the passing attack red hot with great accuracy, but this run game can really tear you up too due to the physicality of not just the backs, but the offensive line as well.
This run game can certainly tear you up if they have to. It's a very physical back. Bucky Irving, 1,000 yards to ground, 6.4 yards per carry, 10 scores. Jordan James, 661, 7.1 yards per carry, and 10 scores. Bo Nix got the 6 scores on the ground when he's using his limited opportunities. Noah Whittingham, they're missing him. He only has played 4 games, but overall, this is still a fantastic rushing attack, a very deep unit. This offense, again, very deep. They have a great ability to score and put up a ton of yards per game, 5.84 yards per attempt on the ground. It's just a very gaudy number if you're playing against a Washington defense that really has not looked fantastic this season.
You look at that offensive line, I felt like they'd be much better this year after a great season in 2022. Josh Connerly, a former 5-star, playing much better down the stretch. Only 1 sack allowed in total this year after, a tough start to the year as a young player. Johnny Cornelius, the Rhode Island transfer, a lot of people wanted him. Hasn't allowed a sack himself at the right tackle spot. I love the interior. I felt as if these guards are really going to dictate where this offensive line goes, and I couldn't have been more spot on. Stephen Jones has been terrific. Marcus Harper, he's also been really good in pass protection. Not as much as a consistent, run blocker, but overall the interior is great, and it's rounded out with Jackson Powers Johnson at center. He's probably the nation's best at his position. Very happy with what he's done this year. Only 1 pressure allowed all year, Nick. Nobody's touching his quarterback, and he's paving the way for some very physical backs.
Cornelius, sought after recruit in the transfer portal from Rhode Island. He has paved the way, been fantastic for this team at right tackle. The rest of the offensive line, Josh Connerly, Marcus Harper, Jackson Powers Johnson, Stephen Jones, are all fantastic, big physical blockers. This is an extremely physical offensive line unit that's getting the job done, allowing Nix the opportunity to stand in the pocket and just sling the ball. They're keeping their quarterback upright, and it's paying out dividends.
Looking at this Washington offense, right there around 39 points per game. This offense has certainly really cooled off as a whole itself. Penix really still has been great. 32 touchdowns, approaching 4,000 yards. This is a guy who's really regained his confidence over the last 2 years with Kalen DeBoer. 3 straight games in a row though of less than 60% completion percentage. Still put up 332 against Utah. The weather really bothered him against the Utes and Oregon State. They had a lot of drops in that game. Even when the weather cooled off though, gaining separation, trying to find that big home run ball. Wasn't always there against the Beavers. Same with Utah. They just keep trying and they eventually find it, Nick. And that strategy is certainly not going to be the greatest, I don't think, coming to a game like this. 204 yards against Washington State in a game they ended up winning by 3 points. Rome Odunze had 120 of that. He also had both of his touchdowns. He's certainly his favorite target. Jalen McMillan's still trying to work his way back in there. Jack Westover's been a very pleasant surprise at tight end for them. And then Jalen Polk as well is just a terrific option for them. So, they have 3 great receivers here. Nice tight end that's been great at finding the sticks. He's had 4 touchdowns this season. The thing about these concepts, though, is they run right downfield, and they're usually jump balls. They include a lot of physicality from the pass catchers. They're going to be facing a lot of press here, which is going to give them some better opportunities. But I want to see them be more creative with their routes, attack the middle of the field a little bit more. Penix has made some bad decisions down the field in terms of forcing it in the coverage. You don't see that on the stat sheet because they usually don't come down with it. But I think they want to try to isolate some more matchups on some post routes, not just outside go routes with these guys, back shoulder fades, winning off physicality, Nick, because that's starting to seem like it's drying up a bit.
Certainly is drawing up. This offense has cooled off a little bit. Michael Penix's Heisman campaign has cooled off as well. Still having phenomenal. These are stats before the game against Washington State, so these are not fully updated, but he had 66.5% complete percentage, 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 picks prior to the Washington State's game. He's still a fantastic quarterback, great in the pocket, very confident, looked good against Washington State, 18-33 for 204, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Had a really interesting play that was designed towards the end of the game where he threw the ball to Odunze on 4th down to convert. Odunz's favorite target, had 120 and 2 scores against Washington State, a fantastic wide receiver who is just having an incredible season. His numbers prior to the Washington State game: 1,200 yards, 11 scores, 18.3 yards per catch, 66 receptions. Odunz is just an incredible wide receiver. Jalen Polk, Jack Westover, Jalen McMillan are all very talented wide receivers and tight ends as well. This is a great unit that is a lot of different guys that can catch the ball. They've cooled off a little bit, which is certainly of concern if you're a Washington fan. This is not the same offense that played Oregon just a few weeks ago, which is definitely a little concerning. But overall, this is a fantastic group of weapons that Penix can throw to.
Yeah, the running game was yards against Oregon, 13 on 13 attempts against ASU, less than 100 against Stanford, and then it took off. They destroyed a terrible USC defense, found some rhythm against Utah and Oregon State. Dylan Johnson's emergence has been great for this offense, up to 961 rushing, 12 touchdowns on the year. And again, there's still not a big part of their offense as they run the football. Only about 15 attempts per game for Johnson. He certainly hasn't been involved as much as a receiver like I thought he would. This is certainly an extra element here. They certainly want to continue to rely on timely runs, picking up first downs and short yardage. That's something they've been able to kind of lean on over the last month or so with this rushing attack. The consistency isn't all that great, but over the last 4 games, I'm pretty happy with what this rushing attack has accomplished for being in a bit of an air raid system.
I think this is a fantastic rushing attack that is getting better. You didn't really know what to expect out of this air raid system, whether or not they would be able to run the ball. Johnson, like you said, though, the 12 touchdowns for him, over 950 yards on the ground. Solid numbers for Dylan Johnson. He's a really solid back. They have to get him involved, I think, against Oregon. If they want to have a lot of success, I like to see him carry the ball a fair amount. I think that is a big recipe for success potentially. He had 82 yards and 1 score on 21 attempts against Washington State, so they certainly have a way to run the ball at this point in time. I think a more balanced offense would do a positive for this Washington offense and would certainly help them against Oregon here.
Yeah, the biggest thing I like about this offense is the tackles they possess. Troy Fortuna, Roger Rosengarten. These guys have just been elite pass blockers this year. Well over 700 snaps this season. Well over 450 each in pass protection, and they still have just been flat out solid. Interior not as sound like Oregon's. Parker Brailsford's phenomenal at center. Nate Calepto at guard, though he's certainly going to have a big game. And then whoever anchors that other left guard spot is kind of going to beat up this season. The offensive line, though, for Nick's, it's great. They have clean pockets for days, and that's why Penix is so frightful and very scary. And I don't think that's going to change by any means. But I think this is an underrated part of this offense. Not a lot of people talk about is how good the left and right tackles are.
I think this is certainly something that's not being discussed enough. This is a fantastic offensive line that has physical players. Fatanu is fantastic at left tackle. Julius Below at right guard is also solid. Roger Rosengarten at right tackle is a fantastic physical player. This is a young offensive line, which is one of my criticisms in the preseason was I thought it was a younger, inexperienced unit, but they've been playing very strong together and are a solid unit so far throughout the season.
Looking at the Oregon defense, a couple weeks into the year, I felt like this team would probably be the best chance to escape the Pac-12 in terms of making the playoff, just because I felt this defense would take a next step that not everyone else would be able to keep up with. And they've been dominant against the run, 3.3 yards per carry, only in about 4 games of 100-plus rushing allowed. One of those was Texas Tech, where they had a lot of QB run involved. Portland State, they beat them by 70 points, and they put up 148 rushing. So, a lot of outliers here. California, they beat by 40, had 100-plus. Arizona State, also same margin. So, even though these teams have put up 100-plus, Nick, it's been in complete blowouts, minus the Texas Tech game back in week 2. This run defense has been phenomenal. Starts with a defensive line led by Jordan Birch, Brandon Dorless off the edge. This pass rush has been a lot better than it was a season ago. They had 18 sacks. Another up to 30. They had 18 a season ago, up to 32 this year. And the depth at this position isn't all that great. Oregon fans, for some reason, try to argue me with that, but it isn't. It's not all that great. It's really up to these 2 seniors here, or veterans, that is, in Birch and Dorless. They've both been very good against the run as well, and you've seen against Oregon State a lot of stunts and twists. Those guys were just completely blowing up the game for 60 minutes, and that's why the Ducks, the Beavers, that is, really struggled. Pope Amavi, though, at defensive tackle, he's very sound. Casey Rogers, a veteran. These guys don't blink up front, Nick, and obviously the Washington rushing attack, it's got to keep the other team honest. It's got to be somewhat there. It's not really going to be leaned upon that much, but it's really kind of saved this offense, it seems, over the last month or so. If they can't be efficient here, especially in short yardage, that could be a big plus for the Ducks.
certainly could be a big plus for the Ducks if they can find a way to make the Washington offense not efficient. This is a unit, this defensive unit. We wondered if Dan Lanning would be able to turn the defense around when he got to Oregon. He was defensive coach at Georgia, and defense had never really been the strong suit out there in Eugene. This unit is solid. They've definitely improved. 15.9 points per game allowed so far, 3.31 yards per attempt allowed on the ground, 13 TDs given up to 10 interceptions. So this is a physical unit that does get the job done. They have some nice pieces on the front seven as well. They've been better against the run, which I think is a key to this. Can they stuff the run and force Washington to pack? Washington will pass the ball and they'll be able to do so. But I think the secondary for Oregon can step up and make the plays when they have to keep them in this game.
Keon Ware-Hudson, Taki Tamani as well on the interior. I think there's great depth on the interior D-line. The defensive end positions, not so much. This spot, Mario Cristobal really helped beef up and, left Dan Lanning some nice pieces to work with. You look at the linebackers, Jamal Hill, Jeffrey Baza, converted DBs down to this position. Baza, he's coming off a great game himself against Oregon State. These guys are really coming into their own this year. They continue to grow at these positions. I think they're confident, and that really shows with the ability to slow down the run. Hill is still kind of coming along, especially defending the run, but Baza really seems to have this position down packed. His coverage skills still stand out as well. Really good tackler. Run defense. These guys are still growing in that area, but it hasn't plagued this team one bit. I don't think it will be. I just want to see them make sound, clean tackles and be good in coverage when it comes to defending guys like Westover in the middle of the field. And I think they'll be all right in that category.
I think they'll be all right in that category as well. I think, like you said, just be sound over the middle of the field, make tackles. The secondary is a solid unit overall. They do have decent pass protection, like I said, giving up 13 touchdowns and 10 picks for them. So 10 picks is not a bad number. They do get up there and grab interceptions they need to. As long as they're strong and physical and keep everything in front of them, I think it could be a pretty easy task for them, potentially slowing down this Washington offense if they can get everything right in the right tune and make Penix uncomfortable.
I was very happy with what they were able to do in the offseason with this secondary. Obviously, they made a lot of improvements in terms of guys like Evan Williams, Kyrie Jackson coming over. Those two have had tremendous seasons. Tysheem Johnson as well. A lot of pieces that have really stepped up this year for the Ducks in the secondary, but they were not great at all, against Washington in the first matchup. They're flat out losing those jump ball opportunities. One-on-one matchups really plagued this Ducks secondary. Dante Manning, he's a guy that's really stepped up. He had a phenomenal game against Oregon State. You look at guys like Tysheem Johnson, Jackson. They play the most in terms of playing outside corner. You throw in other guys like Triquez Bridges and Nico Reed. They couldn't stop them, Nick. Not a single guy was playing good against Washington. They were all getting beat. They're all giving up yards. And I think they've certainly learned and they've grown from that. They play a lot of press coverage. They want to continue to be physical. Gave up 316 and 4 touchdowns in that contest. The next week, they gave up 438 to Washington State. And since then, they've been a little bit better. Oregon State, they can certainly hurt you with big plays across the middle. They played USC and Caleb Williams. They didn't crack all that much there. 20 completions for 306 yards by the Trojans. And then Oregon State, they just completely collapsed them, really, due to the pressure they were able to create. And I think you're going to see a more attacking style here against the Huskies. These outside corners, though, they certainly have to hold up. I like what they have at safety, though, and I think they're going to be able to defend the middle of the field just well. But at the end of the day, it's really going to come to those guys at the outside. They're playing with a lot of confidence right now, especially Dante Manning.
They are certainly playing with a lot of confidence. They have an opportunity to be a strong physical unit. Kyrie Jackson's been fantastic, 7 pass breakups for them. A good player. He has 2 picks. I like what I've seen of him. Jeffrey Bass has been good as well. Tysheem Johnson has 5 pass breakups. Looks good. Dante Manning playing a lot better. 5 pass breakups for him. This is a good physical secondary that's got an opportunity here to be tested against an air raid offense. They saw them earlier in the season and struggled a little bit. Can they turn it around and look better against this Washington offense?
Now looking at the Washington defense, a unit that certainly has come under fire a lot as of late, over 23 points per game allowed this season. They certainly didn't do that great against Cam Ward in a passing attack. It's really just slowed down over the last 2 months in Washington State. They played a pretty good game against Oregon State. The Beavers only had 20 points. Held Utah to nothing in the second half. A couple weeks before that, a team that really didn't have a quarterback, USC, tore them apart. Stanford, surprisingly, was able to just throw the ball all over the field. And more importantly, they give up 541 the first time to Oregon. Some nice balance there from the Ducks. The biggest reason why the Ducks didn't win that game is because they got stopped twice on 4th and goal, where they could have had 6 to 14 points. Instead, they had 0 on the scoreboard. Nick, this defense, I think, has certainly had some struggles when it comes to defending the run. They have pieces that can certainly slow it down. They have, given up a lot of yards, a medium amount of yards, a good amount of touchdowns as well on this side of the ball. Guys like Idufan Ulafashio, though, Carson Bonner, a linebacker, these guys are certainly solid. And I think when you look up front, you've got guys like Brian Trice, who's a phenomenal edge rusher, Zion Tupula with the 2. He's certainly playing with a heavy heart himself, but he's certainly showcased his ability to be great against the run. Tuli Latulu-Gaznoa, they're great when he's on the field, but when he's off the field, he certainly does not. The Washington Huskies do not play the same type of run defense. He is highly impactful for them in the middle of the field. What do you expect here, Nick? Do you expect them, have another 5 yards per carry and 204 yards, or do you think the Huskies are going to kind of sell out here to try to slow down this balance?
I think the Huskies would ideally like to sell out to slow down this balance. I don't know if that's really achievable for this front seven. This is a unit that's just not been as great as we hope. This defense as a whole, 23 points per game given up, 4.3 yards per attempt on the ground. Total offense 5.53 total yards per play, not including the game against Washington State. These are all their averages for the 11 games prior, including the game against Oregon. They looked good at times against Oregon. They got stops on fourth down when they needed to, but that was more for Dan Lanning taking gambles here. The run defense needs to be good. It has to have their star players fully playing. Like you said, Tuli Latulu has to be at full strength, 14 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. He's got to be in there. He's just a big physical body that disrupts the run, even if the numbers are not fantastic in terms of production. Zion Tupelo-Fulati, the senior, 23 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He's playing with a lot of motion right now, and he's playing very strong, big physical player. If you're going to highlight a guy to have a big day, I think that's the guy you look at.
Yeah, again, this 4-2-5 has some exceptional linebackers. The secondary, though, they're going to have to play a great game. The first time they played didn't really pass the test, but Jamar Muhammad, he's playing phenomenal football. Oklahoma State transfer. He had himself a day against Oregon State, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. They targeted him 6 times, and those were the numbers. I mean, he touched the football every single time. Certainly had a nice battle with Troy Franklin in the first game. He won some reps, lost some as well. I think that confidence is going to be fun to watch going into this one. This unit is one of the nation's worst in giving up explosive plays through the air. So not only Muhammad, but some of his friends as well. Michelle Powell, Elijah Jackson on the other side. You look at Dominic Hampton, who's their leading tackler. These guys are all going to have to step up. And I think this defense certainly has a lot of talent. They haven't always shown that, though, especially in the back end. I know some injuries really kind of ruined the plans they had for the secondary's improvements. Guys like Austin Turner going out early, Davon Banks. Those were big losses for the secondary, but they've had plenty of time to adjust. And, they didn't have the greatest game. I mean, they were able to toughen up in the red zone against Oregon the first time. But I didn't like what I saw against Washington State. They're terrible against Stanford. They were pretty much torn apart for almost 8 yards an attempt in the first game of Oregon. Even Cal and Arizona were able to have some success, even though Cal really was able to have most of that in garbage time. The interceptions they're able to come down with, I think, is the biggest part for this football team. Up to 15 on the year snagged. That's highly impressive that they're able to create, especially Jabbar Muhammad, Nick. What are they going to have to do in this game? Because they have the talent, I think, to certainly play better. And the turnovers they force, they're going to have to find a few of them here. But that's hard against this red-hot Knicks passing attack.
Certainly, Bo Nix is not a guy that's going to be turning over the ball a whole lot. 15 interceptions is solid. That's a good number so far this season. I do like what I've seen. They got 2 against Cam Ward in the game against Washington State, which I think was pretty solid. They've given up 19 passing touchdowns. Jabbar Muhammad looked good in the 11 games prior to games Washington State, 37 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 picks for him, 10 pass breakups. He's been your best coverage asset. He's going to have a great day. They're going to have to probably put him against the best player they can put out there. He needs to have a really solid day. This 4-2-5 needs to stand strong and be good in the secondary. You can't let Bo Nix torch them. They got to make Bo Nix uncomfortable. They had some success against Nix in the game they won earlier in the year. Can they have similar success? I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but they would certainly like to win this game.
Yeah, and the pass rush is one of the nation's worst in terms of production. Yeah, Trice generates plenty of pressures at a high rate. They had 5 against Washington State, so they're 19 sacks on the year. It's one of the nation's worst offensive lines, though. Again, only 19 sacks on the year. Getting pressure in this contest does not seem like it's going to be imminent. They had 1 sack in the first contest against Oregon. They're really going to have to step up here, Nick. They're not playing a bad offensive line. They're playing an outstanding one in all levels. The pressure's certainly going to be there from Trice, but they have to create negative plays. That has to be there. You can't just have pressures on the stat sheet. You have to have them in these 3rd and 2nd and long situations.
They're certainly going to have to create pressure and get things done and really start to, attack Bo Nix and make him uncomfortable. If Bo Nix has all the time in the world to throw in the back, he's going to pick you apart over the middle of his plethora of weapons and pick apart the secondary that looked weak at time. You have to put pressure on Bo Nix immediately. That is really the big key to success here is can Washington get pressure on the quarterback? I don't believe they're going to be able to, but if they can find a way to do so, they'll be very competitive in this game.
We're going to tail the tape, the team comparisons Quarterback, it was even the first matchup. I'm going to stick with it here, even though Nix is certainly playing at a better rate. There's no, temperature, weather, or any of that. There's not going to be any conditions that are going to bother Penix here like they have in a couple of the recent games. Running back, I'll give that edge to Oregon, led by Jordan James and Bucky Irving. Wide receiver, I'm kind of considering this even as well. I want to give a slight edge to Washington because those guys are certainly McMillan and O'Duns are probably going to be higher on NFL draft boards. Offensive line, even as well. I mean, they're so good at pass protection. I think Oregon certainly has the edge on the interior. Certainly got to pay the respects to the tackles the Huskies field. Defensive line, this is going to be a clear edge for the Ducks, what they've been able to do against the run this year. Certainly producing much more as well off the edge than the Huskies are. Linebacking core, I got to give the nod to the Huskies there. I think that Ufashio is phenomenal. Bruner himself hasn't having a bad year. Raylan Gorforth has a couple of, tackles for loss as well. Secondary, clear edge for the Ducks, I would say. Washington, again, they give up a lot of explosive plays, even though Jabbar Muhammad is phenomenal. I think overall the more talented unit lays with Oregon. I think they're certainly playing at a higher level as well. This one is one where it's all over the place, Nick, and you really go either way for most of these positional groups. How you feeling?
This is a very balanced matchup between two teams. It really is a toss-up basically across the board. I think these are fair tale of the taste, but this is essentially a toss-up. You could really give either team a great run. I think quarterback is about as even as it gets really at this point. Oregon does get the nod at running back just due to production. Wide receiver, I'd be tempted to give it to Oregon as well, but I could see why with O'Duns, who's just such an incredibly talented playmaker and plays at such a high level. O-line, I think it's about as even as it gets. The defense, you could make a case potentially for the defensive line for Washington if they're firing on all cylinders, but I think the defensive line for Oregon gets the nod. The only one that I think is a clear-cut answer yes for one team is the secondary for Oregon. I think they are significantly better than the Washington secondary, and that's the only one that I really feel comfortable saying is a very clear advantage to one team.
Final thoughts on the prediction, keys to the game for Oregon. Showcase good balance, find some pass rush when it matters most, execute better in the red zone. That's the one thing that really plagued them in the first matchup. And for Washington, collapse that Ducks running game. Give Penix those clean pockets like you have all year. And keep everything in front of you in the secondary. With that omen that Oregon struggled in the red zone in the first matchup, you're okay with giving up some yards, right? Knowing your defense can toughen up when it matters most. We'll see if that's a strategy they opt to go with. I think Oregon right now is just a team on a mission. They're very fun to watch. The balance is great. Nix has been highly accurate, doesn't make mistakes. Washington, their defense is certainly not playing as good as I probably thought they would be earlier on in the year. They certainly have some talent that can step up and completely change the game with a strip sack or an interception. Oregon's just not going to give you those opportunities, Nick. Washington, they're not completing passes at the same clip they were, especially when it comes to big plays. Of course, obviously, weather conditions, again, are not going to be a factor here. And I think that could certainly be a big edge for Penix and these guys to get back on track. I just think Oregon here, all they got to get is a stop or two or three, and they're going to blow this one right out of the water. I don't see them getting stopped all that often. I think Washington's certainly going to be in for a couple of stops. I think the secondary is going to play a little bit better on the outside. Oregon, they're really going to mix things up, keep you off balance. I see them covering the spread in this one. It's really tough to pick Washington to not cover it. Just one team's trending up at a high level and one team's trending down, Nick, where this just seems common. They continue to play in a lot of these one-score games. This is like 5 in a row, it seems, 6 in a row. They've played games, opponents to, under 10 points. They've been beating them by. It's been like this ever since September 30th. I think they've played in one-score games, actually, or 10-point games, that is. That's just not great, Nick. I think Oregon, this is a steam train. You don't want to be in front of Washington. They're going to meet them at the wrong time here. Ducks are probably going to win this one big.
I agree. If I think Oregon's going to win this game, I do have them covering this. I have Washington covering the spread at this point. I'm going 42-38 is my gut pick. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. I think the over is certainly in play in this one. This is a very tough matchup to predict. I do lean Oregon. I think a lot of the voting public's going to lean Oregon as well because Oregon is just a hot team that is absolutely running through teams. Washington has escaped a few games here and there. They escaped with a game-winning field goal against Washington State and looked a little shaky here at neutral site. Bo Nix looks dialed in. No home crowd advantage like they had when these two teams met earlier in the year in October. This is an exciting matchup. This is definitely one of the best games on the slate for a conference title and a huge opportunity for the last Pac-12 champion to go to the college football playoff. Whoever wins this game, they will be in the playoff. 99% chance, I can tell you that. This is an exciting, talented matchup between two offenses that are dynamite. I do agree with you. I think Oregon will get the stop or two that they need to win this game and put this one out of reach for Washington, but this is going to be an incredible matchup top to bottom. They're going to be punching at each other the entire game.
Yeah, Nix just seems way too focused for a letdown opportunity here. So I'll go ahead and take them to cover. I think it could certainly blow them out of the water. But Washington, without those elements, being in a dome stadium, Nick, I could certainly see them being more prone to complete a lot of those balls that we haven't seen over the last couple of weeks due to some of those weather conditions where they like to air the ball out deep with a lot of energy. This is going to be a great one. Privilege that we get to take this one in together in Sin City. A lot on the line. Like you said, final Pac-12 title game. It's going to be a great one.
Cannot wait. Super excited for this matchup. A really great way to send the Pac-12 out. Hopefully it goes with a bang.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Okay.